Hello, everyone. My name is Austin Belzer, and welcome to a very unique interview. The whole story is a documentary about the discovery of a 60-foot hole on Mount Shasta, its implications for the nearby small town, and much more that I won't spoil here. Today, I have Elijah Sullivan, the director, producer, editor, camera operator, and general creative behind the film. The whole story will have its world premiere during Slamdance 2025 at the LA Times Theater on February 21st, with a follow-up screening the following day at the Summer David Theater. I know that was a long intro, Elijah, but welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And
Is it?
for copy editors out there, it's not WHOLE, it's HOLE.
Thank you.
Uh,
Yeah.
um, because I keep correcting myself in my mind every time I come across the film. I'm like, oh no, whole story. But then I have a
Yeah.
second where I'm like, wait, no, no. It's literally
Yeah.
about a hole. So,
Yeah. I debated other titles, but none of them really stuck, and everybody was excited about this one. And that's kind of how people referred to it around town, the story itself, the incident itself. So I kind of couldn't get away from it, and I'm sorry I didn't think of a better one.
I mean, you've got a competition at South by Southwest. There's a surfers documentary where it's just talking about like butts for like 4 words of the title are like just relating to butts.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So,
But not holes.
but not holes.
Okay,
Not
good.
holes.
Then they can have
Got,
butts.
you've got the whole market
Yeah.
covered, pun intended.
And they've had the butt market pretty well in hand for a
Yeah.
while.
But, jokes aside, I'd love to hear about what drew you to the making a full length documentary about this.
It kind of just fell on my lap. I live in Mount Shasta. I've lived in
Mhm.
Mount Shasta for over 30 years on and off since I was about 6. It just came up in a conversation with a friend of a friend one night when we're sitting around having wine, and we were telling stories, our weirdest stories, and she had the doozy of the night in telling us that she knew somebody. Her and her ex-boyfriend had met this guy in a bar who was a friend of her boyfriend. This is how small the town is. There was a lot of investigative work done in this movie, but an awful lot of it was just asking around and people knowing something. And so I heard this story and I immediately thought, I'm going to use this to get a job at the newspaper. I'll write a newspaper article. Even though I had wanted to be a filmmaker since I was a kid, but I had kind of given up on it at that point, and I was just trying to get a job. To my eternal shame, it was somebody else's idea to make a documentary about it, and I was like, yeah, I guess I could. And then one morning, I just woke up like almost in a panic and went, if somebody else is going to make it's a good story, and if somebody else is going to make it if I don't, and they're going to mess it up. Because I've seen, no offense to all the people out there who have made documentaries about Mount Shasta, there have been a few, but they're usually like TV shows
Hmm.
on like this. It's usually like Ancient Aliens, or they have names like, In Search of Monsters or stuff like that, where I kind of go, it's having grown up here, I hadn't really seen the area represented the way I thought it ought to be. And I wanted to kind of consciously balance that out. The I think I had always wanted to make a film set in this milieu around here,
Hmm.
but I didn't have a good through line of a story, and this gave me a pretty decent mystery hook with a strong through line that, in order to tell the story, I had to explain what Mount Shasta was, and I had to go
Yeah.
into some of what was going on here. So that gave the perfect context of kind of like it was still going to be a fun little mystery yarn, but the veggies were hidden inside, in terms of like, for me, like part of it was just smuggling in some of these ideas about what the social consequences have been of spiritual tourism, what the ecological consequences have been, how it kind of fits into the larger narrative of history, and some ideas, and a lot of. I mean, I could talk for hours about um, all the different things that are tucked into the movie for me, and Fortunately, most of that came naturally, so I just focused on making my first film, trying to get enough footage together to tell a coherent story and focus on storytelling,
Yeah, that's like a
which
cool. Sorry, go ahead.
I just again and said and that first moment when I heard the story was in 2012.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, so it took a minute to get everything together to start to make a movie, even though I didn't know how. And then I kind of bumbled through it and did every single thing wrong the first time for everything I did it wrong. I reshot the movie a couple times,
Mhm.
re-edited it a few times. Some interviews that are in that film. There's one interview in that film that took 7 years to get, like just to convince this person. So that was the beginning of a very long thing, and I did not expect to get into Slamdance. This blows my mind. I'm very honored.
Yeah, and I've really liked that Slamdance. I I think it's kind of an underrated festival in terms of documentary. I think I talked about this last year. There was a lot of narrative documentaries coming out, like or maybe this was 2023, but there was like starring Jerry as himself, which was a
Oh
narrative
yeah,
documentary where it was blending
sure.
both documentary and drama
Yeah.
together. And I think a few years before that, you had Downwind, which
Okay.
was
Yeah,
taking that subject documentary and really experimenting with it, which I think is kind of why I love covering Slamdance. And for lack of a better word, is because of their so experiment. I don't. It was funny because somebody asked me, a publicist asked me, or maybe a filmmaker asked me, you know, what are you covering for Slamdance? And I couldn't give them a straight answer because I was just like, they're unlike other film festivals. I think what's really cool about Slamdance, and here's your free promotion Slamdance. You can cut this clip however you want. Um, is that they're just willing to give the space to everyone, regardless if it's like a huge feature with a big producer or something that's made on $500 like on a micro budget. There's no real like agenda I have when covering Slamdance because it's just like I told the publicist or filmmaker everything's good in varying degrees of good, but they're all like worth my time, so, for lack of a better phrase. Like even if I see something that's downright terrible, there's still interesting and fun ideas in it. What was it a few years ago? The Underbug. Um, that really didn't really have a cohesive narrative. It was a horror film set in like um in a house. One person's a burglar and the other person is I forget who the other person is, but it's just a sole location. And it wasn't great, but it had a nice idea to it that I think horror films forget to do is make the atmosphere as exciting as your story.
absolutely.
But that, side thing, I, I I just love how they pick things, how their selection committee picks things. And because with something like Tribeca, it and gosh, some other ones I've been to, AFI Fest, it tends to focus on star power and things like that. And I don't get that sense from Slamdance.
Yeah.
That's a roundabout way of saying that was a great it's uh because yeah, I think yeah, just Slamdance is one of my favorite film festivals to cover. Because it's so varied. I forget what prompted that, but there's your free promotion Slamdance. You can,
Yeah.
whenever you make the film festival trailer next year, you can include that.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's such a huge honor to be invited. I look at I'm getting imposter syndrome looking at the other movies that we're playing with. My movie's playing on a double bill with a short documentary called The Flower Stand Silently Witnessing that looks
Mhm.
incredible. I haven't seen it yet, and it just won a grand prize at Sundance and was nominated for a BAFTA.
Nice. I'll have
And
to
I'm
check
on a
that out.
and I'm on a double bill with that. It's going to play right before my movie. It's intimidating. Like, all the best of the people who made that movie. I can't wait to see it. But oh my gosh, like I'm having to pinch myself fairly regularly.
Yeah, and I um I want to touch on something you talked about earlier. You talked about kind of bumbling your way through the creative
Mm,
process of m making this film, and
hmm.
I, to be totally transparent, that's what it's like from my side too.
Yeah,
You
it's
talked a little bit about, me reviewing The Damned, or I think why I like doing these interviews is because it. I think interviews are kind of a lost art. No shade to well, a little shade to Entertainment Tonight and all the hangout style interviews. I love those, but I think we forget about cinematographers and the art of filmmaking and how hard it is. And I think the more we talk about how difficult it is and kind of shed light on like, hey, here's how you make a film, I think it's of my opinion that it leads to audiences picking things like, oh, hey, this may not, like I was talking about earlier with good ideas in bad films. They might, take a chance on something like El Conde. That was
uh
a Pablo Larraín film
yeah.
last year, I think. Bad film, great idea. Same thing with the new Nosferatu.
Yeah, I haven't
Anyhow,
seen it yet, but yeah.
it'll be on Peacock this week, I think.
Yeah, I'll watch it when I get back. I
Yeah,
his movies look amazing, but I have trouble with some of the content or lack thereof. No
yeah,
shade to Robert Eggers. He's
no
obviously a
shade.
massively better director than I'll ever be, but I mean, sometimes I'm like, I won't say anymore.
Um, but yeah, and to kind of go back on something we talked about, I mentioned earlier you're wearing a lot of creative hats in this movie. What is it? Director, producer, editor, camera
We can
operator.
Most days it was a solo act. Most days I was doing everything. I was wearing every hat. There were a few days I credit a co-cinematographer, Audie
Mhm.
Carlisle, who's one of the few other local filmmakers here, and she would sometimes come and I could delegate cinematography to her, especially on like some of the two camera shoots when we did two camera
Mhm.
interviews, which weren't very many, but I think those ended up being a lot of the stronger ones. She was able to be there, so I think it's about 20 minutes of the movie she shot. Almost all of the B-roll shots are me. It took an incredibly long time. Some of the shots, like I wanted a shot of a lenticular cloud. That took years to get the
Oh,
right
I
shot of the
imagine.
right lentic. They happen all the time, but you have to be ready and they'll disappear after a few minutes. So you see one and you're like, "Oh, you get your camera and you go and you get in position, you set up and it's gone." So that took years. There were shots in the movie where I there's one shot earlier in the film that took me 3 days to get the shot. And because it was a combination of, an outdoor shoot where I needed the light to fall on this path. And it took a little while to figure out where to set up my slider and what lens to use and wait till realize that the light wasn't going to fall where I wanted it to that day and then scout it out and come back and try a couple things and finally land on that shot. And then there were other days where the light was doing something magical. So I just go to a location and do 100 camera setups in an hour and just try to get enough for one sequence where the light is beautiful and it's going to match. So it was it was like one long experimental film that I tried to make it pretty accessible when I edited it, but it was definitely a lot of just fly by night, make it up as you go along type stuff. But also there were a lot of specific things that I wanted that took a very long time to get. The interviews took a long time to get. Editing took a really long time. As you've seen, the movie is almost has sort of distinct movements to it, and some of
Yeah,
those, like the middle section of the movie, I shot the bulk of that 7 years ago, and it took a while. That could have been a whole movie to itself. That guy, Steven Sindoni, I could have made a whole documentary just about that one guy. So there were times where I love editing, but there were times where I wish I had an editor because it was a
me
lot of
too.
work. It's and a producer and a sound person and times for a day I'll have somebody holding the microphone, but most of the time it was just me and I had to every single one of those, if the sound had been bad, I'd be sunk. If the editing had been bad, and maybe they are, but if one of those points fails, the movies sunk, and I had to, and each one of them is the type of thing where somebody makes that their entire career to be excellent at that. And when you see a film, you're seeing a movie where it's a team of people who are all great at their job, who each nailed their department to make something watchable. And I had to kind of live with the fact that maybe I was stronger at some things than others, and then just had to really push to get the other things up to a level where they'd at least pass minimum bar, you know?
Yeah, oh, I know. I 100% like, I'm like, does this look good? I've been working on it for this edit for 4 hours. I think I should
Yeah.
probably stop.
Yeah. And you quickly lose objectivity on it.
Yeah. You have to
Imagine,
walk
yeah.
away, come back.
Yeah, and imagine editing the same sequence for 7 years.
This is why I'm not a film editor. I
Well,
edit
I
my
don't.
own videos, and even then, I'm like, okay, this 15-minute video,
Yeah,
I'm done. I just need to get it out and done.
yeah, and all of this gets easier with money. I never had any money. When people ask how much it cost, I usually say $1,000, but it might not have cost that. It might have been maybe 600, 700, somewhere like that. I didn't
Which
spend
is
anything
rare.
on it. And I can see why, because when I think back on it, how many times I had to be lucky, I had to hear about this story. I had to have several different breaks in the story at various points. At one point, I was going to give up. I was on Facebook chatting with a friend, and she's saying, "So
Hmm.
how's your movie going?" And I'm like, "Well, I don't know if I'm ever going to get an interview with one of the culprits in the case." And I don't want to spoil anything for anybody, but I'm sitting there saying, I think it's time for me to give up. And then a Facebook chat pops up from a stranger saying, "Hey, are you the guy who's making that movie? I have a story to tell you." Literally, as I'm saying, I think I give up. And that person was the guy who's most of the last third of the movie.
Wow.
Yeah. I never would have found that guy if he hadn't reached out to me. So I got lucky so many different times along the way. And then of course the odds of getting into Slamdance astronomically low, you know. So, this is the festival that everybody wants to get in, and I almost feel guilty that like I took a slot from somebody, and I can't objectively evaluate my own movie very easily. So I'm like, oh, I hope
Yeah.
I deserve this because this is there are a lot of people out there who didn't get in, and there's some amazing movies out there.
Oh, amazing. Like,
Amazing movies out there.
it's why, like I said earlier, I just end up saying yes to 90% of the emails I get from people,
Oh, yeah.
unless it's just like clearly not something a fit or
Yeah.
anything like that.
You're
90
just too,
times.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't say no ever.
Yeah.
Maybe I
Because you're
should,
because you're too
but
because you're too nice, or
yeah,
because
probably.
you probably you should. He's like,
Um,
"Are you sure you want me to?" Like, as I'm emailing people on this list, they give you a Slamdance is great, and they give you a list
mhm.
of the people who have signed up to be part of the press for this movie. And as I'm emailing people, I'm like, do I email this person and get like this might not be a good review? Like, is any publicity better than bad publicity? Or like, do I want a review from this huge critic if I can? Like, or anybody, like,
Mhm.
is it better to just keep it a mystery and just be very just play the mystique and just be mysterious in the corner and not talk about the movie, or should I solicit coverage and have people be like, "Well, this clearly cost $1,000, and this was clearly your first movie, but good job getting into Slamdance."
I mean, a little bit of both. Uh, but like, yeah, my advice always has been, I think, just reach out, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
And if it's bad, they'll say it's bad. I know some people on the circuit that are like really brutal with it, but yeah,
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, if I was a critic and I gave everything a good review, I wouldn't have much credibility, right? So
right.
maybe I should have put in each of those emails, if you think the movie sucks, please don't publish the review.
Or a clause. If you'd Halo the series, don't
Yeah.
review this.
Yes. If you liked that, don't do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Uh,
tried to pick people I thought would actually like it, but that's it feels presumptuous, right?
yeah.
I was raised to be modest, and so like I'm very we're talking about different hats to wear. When it came time to do
Hmm.
publicity and to sell the movie, I'm kind of like, yeah, it's this movie I made. You can watch it if you want. Like I'm terrible at selling it.
I mean, same here. The This is real inside baseball. We'll just get real inside baseball on this.
Sure.
when they ask you to, when festivals say, "Hey, tell us a little bit about yourself," I'm like, I'm a dude who writes reviews about
Yeah.
things on the internet, and sometimes
Yeah.
people read them, and it's just like, I probably should be selling that better because I've covered
Right.
big things like Avatar 2, um, and stuff like that. But it's just like, yeah, I'm the same way,
Yeah.
and I think when it's such, I don't want to say independent festival, but it is kind of independent. Um, I mean, it's big now because now this is Slamdance is going into LA where they used to be in Salt Lake City,
Yeah.
Utah, with along with the same week as Sundance, and now they're in February, well removed from Sundance, and just kind of one of the last LA film festivals, but yeah, I guess to say, I mean, I don't know. It's just, I think to talk about deserve, I think I've interviewed enough people to know that I just love how big of a risk Slam Dance always takes on
Yeah.
new filmmakers, or
Yeah.
even just filmmakers that maybe have made something before, maybe have,
Didn't
I
break
don't
through.
know, fallen off the
Yeah.
radar or something
Yeah.
like that, who maybe haven't come out with a project in several years.
Yeah.
I just love that. So,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah. I can't wait to see the other. So I haven't seen any of the movies yet, and you have.
I mean,
You can't say.
if we're being truthful, I haven't seen anything.
Oh,
I,
okay.
I, they, like, I am one of the purists who actually wait during the festival to watch things, or the week before. That's when
Oh,
I just
interesting.
slam, no pun intended,
Yeah.
slam through all the movies that I've
Oh,
got,
okay. All
um,
right. All right.
because I'm just like, that makes much more sense. I can be less, um, opinionated during interviews that way.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
because I mean, knowing me, I'm very opinionated, so I never want that to come on off during an interview. So
You're afraid they'll be able to detect what you thought of the movie.
yeah, I'm good at hiding it sometimes, but
Okay.
not all the time. But yeah, but I will say I learn a lot more worthwhile stuff from just talking to people.
Yeah.
Like an interview I'm going to be posting today on, well, as I'm recording this, um, will be the director, screenwriter, and star of Lockjaw, which is a
Ah,
film
nice.
I'm very excited for.
Yeah.
Um, that was a really great conversation and a
Yeah.
not so subtle plug, um,
Yeah. I have a ticket to that one. I'm looking forward to it.
but yeah, there's so
Yeah.
much good stuff coming out just
Yeah.
based off of emails I'm getting
Yeah.
have been
Cool.
fantastic.
Yeah. I'm going to be there for the whole week, and I'm trying to figure out, just trying to go to things in person as much as possible. And they have four screens, I think, going at once.
Hmm.
This is my first experience with a festival with a schedule this packed, and how do you see everything?
Okay,
Um,
I've got a strategy.
yeah.
Now I've always been virtual, so
Okay.
keep that in mind. I do 3 films a day.
Right.
Um,
That's
because
about
once
what
you
I
get
hit.
4 or 5, I've noticed if I do 4 or 5 a day,
Hmm.
you stop remembering everything about the fourth and fifth film. You just don't
Mm,
remember anything, even if you're taking
mm,
notes. You're like,
yeah.
I watched a fourth and fifth film today. It just
Yeah.
blanks out of your memory. But only see 3 films.
Okay.
That includes, unless you're doing a short film block, then
Right.
just see the entire block that day, and then um see as much shorts on that day as possible.
Okay.
But only see 3 features a day. Eat a lot. Eat more than you think, actually.
Because of all the
Because
calories that your brain's gonna burn. Yeah.
And lots
Got
of
it.
coffee and water.
Yeah.
And comfortable shoes, I've heard, are
Uh,
are a lifesaver. I've got, like, what do I use for exercise shoes? Brooks Ghost 816s are what
okay.
I use for exercise. But yeah, that That's
Okay.
been all of my um things I've learned. Um and also have like a lot of downtime, at least 2 hours of downtime.
In
Um
between.
at the end of the day.
Oh,
Um
yeah.
just relax, to just be silent. Um because when you're going for, I don't know, what, a week,
Yeah.
it's your brain turns into mush by the third day if you don't
Okay.
give yourself some uh time to just really step back.
Yeah, I feel like that's going to be hard for me because my film plays on the I guess like the first day is mostly like an opening night movie and
Hmm.
gala. So my movie plays on the first full day and then that second day. And I have a feeling that after that, I'm just going to be just trying to recuperate.
Probably.
I'm
Yeah,
going to be sitting
probably.
in the theater, just coming down from my panic attack for the next 4 days.
In the interest of being honest, that's me
Yeah.
during the first 5 minutes of the interview. It's just
Oh, really? Oh,
5 minutes before, panic attack, and
right.
then 5 minutes in, I'm locked
Yeah.
in.
It's a little bit like that when I'm shooting interviews too, where like one of the nice things about wearing so many hats is I can be
Hmm.
busy setting up the camera and I'm like, oh, hold on a sec, I need to change
Yep.
lenses until just keep tinkering with things until I'm like ready
Yeah.
mentally.
But
Yeah.
um, let's see. So I guess the big question would be, what would you hope? Like, do you want to talk about upcoming projects that you're
Hmm.
like audiences? What do you hope audiences take away? I'd love to hear any of that.
Yeah, I'm hoping that the movie's going to spark some conversation, especially around here because we've been kind of stuck in this spiritual tourism as a way of, like the
Hmm.
strategy. And I think the movie explains why I feel ambivalent about that. And then I hope it just goes on to like live on, some streaming app like Tubi and just be a nice little midnight movie for people to find.
Unironically, Tubi is the best. Like
It
I
is.
watched some
Yeah.
the 40s era Superman
Oh yeah.
cartoons like that
Cool.
played in front of movies during World
Yeah.
War II
Yeah.
on
We're also
there.
going to see that.
Just
Yeah.
a camera rip. Somebody like recorded them or something like that,
Yeah.
just on Tubi.
Cool.
But yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I when I was making this movie, all nice things to say about the people who make documentaries for Netflix and things like that, but I had to stop watching them because
yeah.
that's not the kind of movie I'm making. And those are all on Tubi or maybe Canopy, somewhere like that, where people are making real underground indie movies with no money and no time, but they have some story. And that's what I'm going to look for next. I have a couple different ideas for a follow-up feature documentary, and I have a couple ideas for narrative films that I want to do. And I guess it's just going to be a bake-off of which one I get through prep on first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I want to follow up on that because you talked about spiritual tourism and
Uh-huh.
other. Um, and by the way, I agree with you on the documentary thing. I had to stop covering Netflix documentaries because they became so formulaic. But I guess my questions
Yeah.
are like, what do you think about spiritual tourism for one? And then kind of I'd love to hear your thoughts on like the documentary landscape and how true crime has become its own genre and kind of
Ah,
market.
those are both huge subjects. With spiritual tourism, I would say like obviously everybody should have all the freedom in the world to explore their spirituality and their imaginations and travels. Just always, anytime a so-called spiritual person asks for money or
Mm,
starts getting involved in like, well, what are the early warning signs that they're going to try to be your cult guru leader guy? Like they get involved in your life a little bit too much and they get a little controlling. I mean, please look for those red flags. Please listen to your friends when they say look out for that person. There are a lot of people around here who have just learned how to grift the folks who come here looking for a spiritual experience. And then the true crime scene, wow. One of the things I loved about this particular story is it's not a violent. I love a good mystery, but almost all the documentaries I could find were about somebody getting murdered or, something really horrible happening to somebody, which are important films to make, but can kind of be wearing. after a while. And so I'm glad. I don't know if I could have made a movie over this long of a span of time if it had been about a murder. That would
Hmm.
have been maybe someday, but um, the true crime scene, it has kind of become an industry. There is kind of a cookie cutter approach to a lot of them. I tried to make this movie accessible without being too relying.
Yeah, well, thank you for all those answers,
Yeah,
and for taking the time to talk about the whole story. Well, thank you, Elijah, for taking the time to talk about the whole story. You enjoyed this interview. Love it if you stayed tuned for more Slamdance and South by Southwest 2025 interviews over the course of the next 2 months. Once again, the whole story will be shown during Slamdance 2025 at the LA Times Theater on February 21st, followed by a second screening the following day at the Summer and David Theater. But yes, thank you again, Elijah, for taking so much time to talk to me. Yeah, and I hope people see the whole story at Slamdance, either virtually or in person. I'd love people to actually come up to you and say hi in person. But
me too.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
You can find me on Blue Sky, Facebook, Instagram, and Threads under my username, Austin B Media, as well as my Discord and Patreon community chat. Speaking of Patreon, if you'd like early access to this next interview or more exclusive content, head on over to patreon.com/AustinBMedia. For just $3 a month, you get 48-hour early access to my reviews, podcasts, interviews like this one, and articles, plus patron-only channels on my Discord. The $10 a month tier, you'll unlock uncut podcast episodes, exclusive episodes, and more. If you enjoyed this interview, stay tuned for more Slamdance and South by Southwest 2025 interviews. Until next time.